I'm speaking with Ben Powell. Ben is Clemson's apiculture and pollinator expert, and we're so glad to join you. What is apiculture, first of all?
Oh, sure. Well, it's the study and practice of managing honeybees or other pollinators.
All right. And let's start a little bit with honeybees, because anyone who's been a Clemson Extension agent has had the call from a frantic person because there's a swarm. In my case, right across from where I'm sitting is a little restaurant where people get sub sandwiches, and the bees were in a tree right by their front door.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, I've had to do some quick calling and find out that what to do was, I think, to do nothing. So, so let's talk about, first of all, what is a honeybee swarm?
Sure. Well, honeybees are social insects. That means that they live as a family with a queen and workers and drones, and they all basically work almost as a super organism. Each individual bee does its own job, but the entire colony is almost like one living creature. And just like any living creature, it must consume and it must reproduce and make more. And the swarming is the process by which honeybees make more colonies. So what happens is the old colony divides into two, and the new queens are left behind to develop, and the old queen takes half of the workforce to go form a new colony.
Aha. We hear a lot about insect behavior being directed by smells and volatile compounds, I guess, that are created or extruded. Is that part of how do they know when they've gotten too crowded and it's time to go?
Sure. Well, insects are a lot like little robots. They've got little switches that turn them on and off and make them do certain behaviors. And for insects, actually smells and what we call pheromones, which they're kind of like hormones in our body. Hormones signal body changes, right? And we go through puberty and other things because of hormones. Same thing with pheromones in the colony. It's chemical signals that they share, which basically tell them what to do. And so swarming is largely caused by changes in these pheromones inside the colony, which says we're either too big for our space, there's too many of us, or the queen's getting old, it's time to go make new colonies.
Okay. And what did they do in response to getting that signal?
So it's funny. A lot of people think the queen is in control inside a colony. She's big and she's got all the instructions, but that's really not the way it works. A honeybee colony works like a democracy to some degree. So the workers are actually the ones who signal it's time to go. So basically, here's the science. The queen emits pheromones to the colony. It says, here, we're under control. I need you to make eggs and search for honey and do the things that colonies do. When the colony gets really big, that chemical signal gets diluted. Oh. And then the workers are like, wait a second, I didn't get the message. And so they start sending signals back saying, wait a second, we're either too big or there's not enough room. We need to do something different. And that feedback, that basically vote that says, hey, we need to swarm, goes back to the queen. And the queen responds by laying eggs in swarm cells. Huh. And these are going to be the new queens that form. Okay.
So those new queens are going to stay with the old hive?
Yes.
Because
actually the workers are the ones who form them into new queens. So workers produce food for the larvae, and in the case of a queen, it's something called royal jelly. And they feed it that royal jelly, which is full of those pheromones and those chemical signals. And that queen, or those series of queens, develop faster than normal workers do. And what happens is when they're about fully developed, then the old queen signals to the rest of the colony, and the colony talks back, and they say, okay, the queens are almost ready, let's go. And so about half of the workforce, the older foragers and the queen, leave the honeybee colony, and those old or the new queens that are left behind will develop and replace that queen that is just left.
Now, you told me that I've heard you once when you were talking about this, saying that it's kind of, the queen almost has to get ready to run a marathon or something. Does she have to change her behavior or anything?
Sure. Her job inside that colony is to make new bees and lay eggs. So she swells, she gets gravid with eggs, and to the point where she can't even fly. She's so heavy. Well, if she's going to swarm and she's got to go with the rest of the workers basically tell her, okay, it's time to slim down. And they starve her. They get her shrunken to the point where she can actually fly again.
Okay. So they take off, and do they protect the queen? Is she in the middle of a big ball of bees? How is it organized?
Right. So they're very vulnerable when they leave. That queen is the only reproductive bee in the colony. If she dies, the colony that left dies. Ooh. And so they must protect her. So what happens is they will leave and go to a nearby tree branch, and she will land on that branch, and then all the tens of thousands of bees that swarm go and collect around her. And they basically ball up around her to protect her. Meanwhile, they send out little scout bees to go find a new home.
Okay.
And the majority of the bees stay there while the scout bees look for a cavity.
And before we had humans involved in this with hives, they would have to find a natural cavity of some sort. Is that how it used to work?
Yes, and they live in forested habitat, so it's typically a tree hole.
Oh, okay. So people just get so upset when they've got, how many bees would be in a swarm, perhaps?
Oh, 10, 20, maybe even 30,000 in a really large swarm.
Which gets people upset if you've got people walking in your restaurant all day right by them. But should we be alarmed if there's a swarm in our yard or near where we park our car? How should we react, and what should we do or not do?
So bees totally change their behavior when they're in a swarm. They don't have a colony to defend, and they're all clustered around that queen. And so they're not defensive. They don't have larvae and honey and food to protect. So they're not going to sting like they would if you came around their colony, their hive. So when they're in that cluster, lots of times people can be right next to them and they don't act defensive at all. In fact, you may have seen videos of people doing the bearding thing where they got bees hanging all off their bodies and stuff.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Well, these are events where they actually force the colonies to swarm, and then they keep the queen caged, and they do these very strange behaviors where they place a bee on them and have them all cluster up on them.
Well, I'm sure our state beekeeper doesn't do any of that.
I know.
But there will be some bees flying away from the scout bees, so it won't just be perfectly quiet with nothing going on, but those bees aren't coming out to sting you. Is that right?
That's right. They are merely looking for a home. And here's another thing. When they leave the colony, they take all the food they can with them. They drink as much of the honey as they possibly can, because that's the only food they're going to have till they find a new home.
Wow.
And they need as much of it. So they don't want to waste that energy. So when they form that cluster, they're actually really cold. They can't fly very well that are in the cluster. And a few scout bees go out trying to find new homes. Once a few of the scout bees have figured out a good place, they start signaling to other scout bees, hey, come check this out. Okay. And those scout bees get recruited. Once they get to a point where there's enough scout bees going to the same place, like I said with the democracy, they all take a vote. And they say, okay, we found it. And they all take off at once. That's usually the kind of scary point in a swarm, because you have 30,000 bees that all lift off at one time, and they're all buzzing around in a huge cloud of bees that's the size of a school bus.
Oh my, look, that big?
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
And so when people see this cloud of bees move through their yard, they get very alarmed. But in all honesty, their job is to get to the new home. They could care less about anybody in that area.
Okay. When they get there, how do they start making cells and making wax and getting the queen busy? I guess they need to get some new bees so that there'll be an ongoing organism.
Oh, yeah. It takes about a month for them to start producing new bees.
Whoa.
And so they've got a lot of work to do in that time. Bees make the wax that they build their combs out of glands in their bodies. And that wax is formed by the sugars they consume. Oh. So that honey that they gorged on before they left is going to be used to build the new wax in the new colony. And so once they find that cavity, they start building wax comb, and very quickly, within a few days, they've made a small group of cells.
Okay.
And the queen starts laying eggs.
Now, does she travel around and lay the egg in each cell, or do they pick the egg up and carry it?
She inspects it, makes sure it's just the right size and shape, and when it's correct and ready to go, she lays an egg in the bottom of the cell, and then it's going to take 21 days for that egg to turn into a worker bee. Meanwhile, the remaining workers are doing their best to build that colony so that there's more places to lay eggs.
Now, if the queen had been getting kind of old and maybe wasn't going to be as productive as a new one would be, what are they going to do with her? Do they give her a retirement, or how do they handle it?
Yeah, nature's not necessarily as kind in some ways. If a queen has gotten to the point where she's got a sporadic egg-laying pattern, she's not producing those pheromones that we talked about, then the workers will decide it's time for a new queen, and they'll kick her out. Oh. And when she gets kicked out, she's going to die. But
so they have
workers
already
will take those eggs that she's laid,
yes,
and they'll form them into new queens.
Okay. So do they start that before they kick her out, so they'll always be an active, viable queen, or can they get by for a few days without a queen?
Well, they can survive for a month or so without a queen.
Really? My goodness. Okay. So they're
like I said, the queen's not necessarily in control of the hive. She's just the main reproductive unit. So they want to protect her, but the workers and the signaling they do to each other is really what controls the hive.
Okay.
So it takes 21 days to form a new worker, and they will take those eggs and start to turn them into queens. That only takes 16 days.
Oh, goodness. Right. Okay. So. Now, we hear that bees are expensive, and sometimes if there's a swarm in your yard, do beekeepers want to come and capture that swarm?
Oh, sure. Yeah, free bees.
Okay.
Right. So one of the tasks that beekeepers have is to split and divide colonies. They try their best to grow their apiaries so they maintain losses that they have incurred before. And so swarms are a quick and easy way to get a new bee colony started. It's a natural division or natural split. So most beekeepers are excited about hearing about a swarm and are willing to help homeowners with collecting a swarm.
Okay. So if people contact their local extension office, they'll probably have a list, or they could call you and see if there's anybody nearby.
Yes. Actually, probably the best place to go for information is the South Carolina Beekeepers Association website.
All right. Okay.
That association has a link to all the local associations, and there's about 24 around the state.
Okay.
Right. And so you can contact your local association, and they have a group of beekeepers that collect swarms.
And how long should people, we're going to tell them just relax, don't go and disturb them, but, just go about your normal daily business. You can hang your clothes on the line and all of that. How long does it usually take for them to find a new home and move on?
Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer because there's a lot of factors that contribute.
Okay.
How many possible homes are around, what the weather's like, what food resources are available. So typically when a swarm cluster forms, it's there for about a day, 24 hours.
Wow, that's quick. Right. I wish I could move that quickly.
Yeah. And then, if there's a cavity nearby, they'll go ahead and move on. But I've seen swarms linger for 3 or 4 days at a time. But it's not a problem because they're not defensive.
Mm-hmm. They're going to stay.
In that case, we call a beekeeper and get them to come grab the swarm.
That would be cool. Okay. Well, and then we have a home and garden information center that whenever somebody asks me something, I say, just a minute. And then I look there and they say, gosh, you know so much, because there's such great fact sheets there. Is there a fact sheet there about swarms?
Yes, I just updated a new one. It's a frequently asked questions about honeybee swarms, and it's on the Home and Garden Information Center website.
Okay. Well, Ben Powell, thank you so much for what you're doing to encourage people to take care of and respond properly to these situations. Sure appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate the public's assistance. And next time you see a honeybee swarm out there, know there's help for you.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.